everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa Dickens, co-founder of LMR Re and board director of the UKPA, and I shall be your weekly host. Each week for 30 minutes, we'll be connecting the VCs, Proptech startups, and real estate professionals globally, and assist in bridging that famous communication gap we all love talking about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. Today, we are speaking with Phil, Oliver, and Joff Sharpe from Excel Group, and we'll be discussing how we create a business with end-to-end collaboration for everyone, everywhere, anytime, and any place. So welcome to the show, Phil and Joff.
Thanks very much for having us.
But first, time for introductions. So we'll start off with Phil, who is the Chief Business Development Officer of Excel Group. For those who don't know Excel Group, it's an award-winning provider of bespoke managed communication services. They deliver and support connectivity, cloud and communication solutions for the business. And Phil will be telling us more about it when we start with the questions. Now, Phil has over 15 years experience in the Proptech industry, which is a lot more than most of us. Having previously led teams at O2, WorldPay, and Fluid One, Phil joined Excel Group to drive Excel's aggressive growth into the property sector. Already, Phil has played a crucial role in driving digital transformation for some of the industry's leading property companies, including British Land, CBRE, Landsec, and Workspace Group. Phil is passionate about innovation and leads with a focus on coaching and personal development to create company cultures where employees are passionate about the positive impact and benefits of technology. So thank you for joining us today, Phil. Now, time for Joff's introduction, who is also joining us and is a senior advisor to Proptech company Excel and Inventure, an LA-based executive search company. Prior to this, he was COO of British Land PLC, a FTSE real estate investment trust, where he founded a flexible workspace startup Story. He also chaired property management company Broadgate Estates and Proptech company Vicinity. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Is that right, Joff?
That's it, yeah.
He's a member of the New York Real Estate Council and is a published author of business topics and has freelanced for Newsweek, Huffington Post, and Hong Kong South China Morning Post, amongst others. And also, for everyone listening, his second edition of Who Dares Wins in Business is coming out. So whoever writes a better review of this episode will get a signed copy from Joff himself. But now let's start with the questions. And yet again, thank you both for joining me. So we briefly summed up, very briefly, what Excel does, Phil. And online, it describes the business as end-to-end collaboration for everyone, everywhere, anytime, any place, as we mentioned in the introduction. But I would love to hear a bit more about what the business does, how it's been developed, and a bit more about your clients from you, Phil.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us, Louisa. A hell of an intro on me, so I'm glad that we don't have the cameras on, to be honest. But, so I have grown up through in the telecoms and tech industry and have moved through into the Proptech arena as we now are. Not sure it's been 15 years in Proptech, but certainly that long in technology. So I'll let that one go. But in terms of Excel, we're coming up to our 30th year, actually, or in our 30th year. We're owned and founded by two brothers. And we really have kind of moved with the time. So we started very much, I believe they did, on fax machines and telephone boxes and all sorts of good stuff like that, and moved through to a PBX world where we made a real change and a difference in strategy and moved through to connectivity and cloud. We currently have two very different types of business. We have kind of the traditional direct cloud services provider in terms of moving that PBX business into cloud telephony, but also through to multi-site MPLSs and much more deeper tech. And we have a real focus now on the Proptech market, because obviously we've just seen how much that has expanded and grown over the last 10 years, I'd suggest, but really very much so over the last 5 years with the introduction of kind of the flexible working market. And really what we do is we deliver the cloud services. So everything that goes into the ground and into that building comes out and allows the cloud proposition, whether that be, as you mentioned, the connectivity, cloud services, cloud Wi-Fi, and all the collaborational tools on top of that, for that building, the landlord, the customers within that, to really thrive and grow and use technology simply in order to make their businesses grow, essentially.
And who are your sort of clients? I mean, after nearly 30 years, they must vary in size and type.
On the traditional side of the business, we have what we call our direct side. We have everything from SME to large enterprise, but the customers you might know, like Veolia, H&M, Contact Centre, which is a big call centre. And then on our Proptech side, our connected building side, we have, as Joff alludes to, we've got British Land Story, Landsec and Myo, CBRE, FlexSpace, and we have a very large partnership with Workspace Group. And they're kind of our larger customers, but what we also do is really focus on the smaller agents, landlords, and owners for 1 to 2 sites type buildings and the entrepreneurs that are driving out that property market at the moment.
Now, Joff, you're a advisor of Excel. How did you first get involved in the business? I presume there was a previous relationship between your time at British Land and your time of obviously founding Story.
Yeah, well, we were a customer and I was responsible for technology and operations, at British Land, and Excel was a supplier. And then when we set up Story, the flexible workspace, the Excel service was extended into Story. So I became a double customer.
And I guess, tell me a bit more about being a double customer. What was your experience of working with Excel before that?
Well, they were basically providing communications, connectivity and cloud, as I say, initially into the mainstream British Land business, which is a real estate investment trust with large properties basically in and around London. And then Story was an innovation. It was a flexible workspace business. And obviously Excel were in a good position to tender for that business, and they secured it, and they're now in a dozen buildings all over London. So that was the start of my relationship with Excel. And then I left British Land to do other things, principally involved in private equity. And the two things came together. Excel were talking to some investors about different things, and they wanted somebody who could advise on the real estate sector in general, and particularly flexible workspace. And they already knew me as a customer and invited me to become involved with the company. And I have done for about 9 months now.
And the rest is history. Now, Phil, tell us a little bit more. How does Excel exactly slot into the whole working from home, flex workspace, everything like that? How can you make it more tech enabled?
Well, we've always been in the space of being able to make customers be more flexible, let's say, in terms of moving employees from their office to their home. Obviously, through the COVID era, that's just had to be accelerated much more. I think businesses were always flirting with the idea of people were working flexibly, weren't they? But really, it was more, can I work from home on this day? Not necessarily flexible, as I'd suggest. Whereas now, what we're seeing is we customers are going to have to, or potentially need to think about taking a kind of remote worker first thought process or strategy. The reason why I say that is we've all had to move and work from home, whether that be the laundry room or the spare room or, nice home offices or whatever it may be. That's just the space that you're sitting in while you're working. Really, the interesting part is an important part for that employee, that company, and obviously their customers, is that they can communicate and collaborate properly. So how do you do that when you're spending a lot of the company is spending a lot of money on their infrastructure in the company premises, let's say, which could be in a workspace building or a Story office or wherever it may be, to then giving that employee the same seamless transition to their home office. That being, as I think we've all fallen over bad connectivity in the past. And
I think those who are listening today, we actually were recording this earlier and my internet completely cut out. So I know firsthand as of 2 minutes ago
exactly
what bad connectivity is like.
I thought it was best that you mentioned it. So I have a solution for that problem. And what that is really is we can give dedicated internet access and whichever flavors that be to the home or to your office, and make sure it's uninterrupted in layman's speak for that user. Now, that uninterrupted is changing a lot now. So whether or not it's HD 4K cameras that are trying to stream every last good-looking face through the camera to on their Teams call, or it's their children are playing on their Xbox or they're watching Netflix, on that same internet line, which is taking the bandwidth away from that person working. So we can dedicate and secure that service. And what's really important for that user then is the security on the end of it. So cybersecurity is on the rise. I know our COO talks about this. I can't remember his percentages, but he does talk about it a lot, so I should do. Over 300%, something like 30 or 300 billion of risk now in phishing and cybersecurity. And that is much more at home based. Obviously, if you're working in your office, you don't have that challenge. We do, but not as much as you do on a consumer type proposition. So we can secure that and give a business grade connectivity, telephony, collaboration tools, and security, so that remote worker first strategy, so they're set up to work at home or from the coffee shop or wherever it may be, as a priority.
Yeah, well, I guess that sort of leads us quite nicely into a question which is definitely for Joff. So with us, I guess with the unknown of the unknown date of getting back to the office, what does the flexible workspace look like post COVID and I guess post WeWork era, Joff?
Well, I think it's funny actually. Adam Newman, who founded WeWork, he was kind of discredited or lampooned for saying that he's raising the world's consciousness. That was one of his sort of many claims to fame. In a kind of weird way, he's right. I think, firstly, everybody's now going to be more considered in the way that they get things done. So whereas typically, if you had something complicated to achieve, most people would think, well, what I need to do is get on a train, go to work, call a meeting, get 6 people in a room, possibly provide them with donuts, maybe not. And that's the way we'll work. And I think now people are just more thoughtful about, is that necessary, desirable? There's an opportunity cost of the travel and everything else. Is that really the best way of getting things done? And that's not to say that the office will be dead. And in fact, the office could even become more valuable in the sense that people make sure it's value added. And, when they do go there, they make maximum use of the meeting amenity, the technology, the opportunity to pick the brains of their colleagues. If somebody's newly joining the company, for example, they'll want to make the best of the opportunity to sort of socialize and get orientated to the culture. So I think it can actually be a sort of an era of added value. And, my own kids are sort of coming into the world of work now, and I kind of feel optimistic that they are, rather than having a sort of automatic default position of going into an office and sitting at the same desk with the same screen ad infinitum, just to having as I say, an altogether more sort of intelligent perspective on how to get stuff done.
I think there's one thing which I found with our team is, I know we're all looking to get back to the office. Everyone loves having the autonomy, but also it's when you are working from home, even when your connectivity and your workstation, you're fully sort of set up, it's when do you switch off? And I know our team, they're permanently online, Microsoft Teams, as long as you got your green light on, you're getting hunted down by your seniors. So
yeah, it also depends a little bit on your circumstances. So if you're like the three of us, we probably have quite a nice working environment. And so when you think of home working, you think of, some level of focus and concentration. But of course, a lot of people don't have that privilege. They're in a cramped home competing for space and privacy. You might have a parent, a single mother with children who are also at home competing for attention and so on. So it's not necessarily as blissful as, and it can even be divisive. As I say, it can even be socially divisive, which is perhaps something people haven't really sort of thought enough about yet.
Yeah. And I guess it's also, what budget is your company giving you for maybe your workstation, with desks, chairs, everything like that. It all sort of adds up, doesn't it? We mentioned collaboration earlier, and Phil, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you if we could delve into, how can we increase collaboration in this new era, or even like beginning of 2021?
So you mentioned it briefly there, but I think it's interesting to think about what collaboration is and how we work together. I mean, I certainly now, I was talking to someone the other day, and going back to the office might be a little bit strange in terms of meetings and, walking to meeting rooms or booking meeting rooms, because literally all I do now is push that Teams button, and if they're not picking up, I think they're ignoring me. So what are they doing? But there's lots of different collaborational tools that we can use or out on the market. And there's loads of kind of SaaS disruptors that are coming over the top. So you've got kind of, if you like, your Magic Quadrant, your Microsoft Teams, but there's also the telephony plays. Obviously, there's Zoom that everyone knows about, but there are Avaya collaboration tools that are out there. And what they do is they bring everything together. So that could be not just necessarily using Zoom for your video conferencing, but actually the whole tool or the platform brings together your social media, your messaging, your instant messenger, your telephony, your video calls, video messages, everything like that. So it becomes its own little environment, and people can post whatever they want on there, or questions or feedback or recognition. And it's essentially a place where work can be done and collaborated to. It's also, of course, social element is now changing so much more. So are you going to go out after work and play some sport together, or go to the gym, or go to the bar, or have some dinner, or whatever it may be? Actually, now collaboration means people thinking about forced fun almost. It's like a bit like, yeah. So, but these things are all moving forward. And then of course, there's collaboration. What does that look like back in the workspace? Because as we've just mentioned, flexible space and Proptech market is changing. And I think it's fair to say that we don't know what that looks like yet, because we're kind of people, we're pushing an agenda that it will change and that hybrid is the future. But actually, do we actually know? I mean, Excel are in quite a good position for that. But flexible space, certainly, and whether that's offices, meeting rooms, or co-spaces, what does that look like? I'm not sure most people know yet, but I do know that there's solutions and agile tech to help people collaborate around that and feel safe.
And where does the role of corporate HR slot into this then? I don't know if this is one for Phil or for Joff.
Well, I spent quite a bit of my career in HR, actually, so it's possibly me. But I'm just linking those two questions together, reflecting on some of those comments about collaboration. I mean, I think one of the things that's changed as a result of the lockdown is that people who were reluctant to use certain technologies, and particularly video-based technologies, who probably previously wouldn't have gone onto a Zoom or a Teams unless they really had to, are now basically being forced to adopt. And in doing so, certain things have started to reveal themselves. So, for example, in the recruitment business, I'm an NED to as you say, an LA and New York recruitment company, and I know that's an interest of yours too. But I mean, for example, most recruiters place phone calls as part of screening interviews rather than videos. Probably now a video is a better option. But in particular, if you're recording, and I know you're recording this podcast, you can also then have the script of the conversation being recorded. And I think from a recruiter's perspective, rather than having to rely upon impressions or your own note-taking ability, you can actually go back through the transcript and you could say, well, hang on, what did that person say? And you can scrutinize it, over a cup of coffee half an hour later, rather than having to rely upon a spontaneous and instantaneous assessment. So I suppose that's a mixed blessing, but there's a sort of a depth and an interactivity that's now possible that probably felt a little bit alien only a few months ago. And to answer your question about HR specifically, I mean, one of the fundamental things is that the provisioning of offices was something that we typically took for granted. We'd all just go into the office that was, somebody had taken on our behalf probably years ago, and you kind of accepted as a good or a bad thing. And now the HR directors of the world are having to sit down with their landlords and talk about their core office space requirements, their flexible requirements, their pay on demand requirements, perhaps for event space or boardrooms that they only need once a month. So HR is having to be, again, a lot more planful and involved in property and technology and how those two things come together.
So surely that means some fairly good prospects for the Proptech industry. And so HR is probably looking at other sort of technologies they can involve in the workplace as well to, I guess, increase it's not a tenant experience, your employees' experience as well, to make sure they're happy whenever we get back to the office.
Yeah, how they're happy and how they get work done, and it'll vary by company and by situation. And I mean, I think presentism has always been a sort of disadvantage of office life, and all the clock watching and all these sort of horrible things that go with it. But yeah, but each company, well, I mean, it's easy to sort of say all that stuff's gone away, but if you think about ambition, conventionally ambitious people, are we all buying into a vision that says, if you want to get on, you'll be just as successful in your company dressed every day in your pajamas as if you were going into the office? And right now the answer might be yes, but actually if the most ambitious people start going back into the office and being seen to be, mucking in together, will that become detrimental to people who prefer not? I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying, that there's a sort of an anthropological aspect to all this, and it's going to take a couple of years to play out before we really know what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And Phil, we'll probably go into in the final 4 questions, which is the LMRE part. But what's sort of next for Excel and what for the 30th year? Well, maybe the next 30 years to come. Have you got any sort of big plans in terms of sort of growth or more collaboration?
Yes, so we are on a growth trajectory. Is a priority of us to grow as a business and be part of the ever-growing Proptech market, really. That is a key to our strategy, while enhancing our proposition for the company as a whole. What I would say is I think we're in a really interesting position at the moment where kind of the smart tech is starting to really accelerate through the market, and the IoT or the smart tech, and we've got to ensure that we're agile enough to take that part of the market and deliver the great experience that our customers require. So I think we're being fairly careful at the moment with where we look to invest. We certainly do have investments in scope, but it's where at the moment, because there is just so much going on, whether that be the kind of the green agenda, whether that be the sensors, whether that be IoT, workflows, all that kind of good stuff that complement what we do at the moment.
Position yourself to thrive with a 5-week course that covers the essentials of designing, developing, marketing and operating offices in 2021 and beyond. Check out the Future-Proof Office course at realinnovationacademy.com. Quote LMRE for a 10% discount.
And this will bring us on to the final part. So Joff, why don't you go first? We'll start off with the L. What are the lessons you've learned in your career? You can choose from whether it's from the sort of more HR side or from the British land, or when you sort of first founded Story.
Well, I should send you to your local Amazon store to get my book to get the fuller answer to that question. but the thrust of the book really is there is a red thread. I mean, I guess if I had to try and condense everything down into one thing, it is probably that there are a number of themes that tend to repeat themselves. And, things that make organizations successful, that make leaders successful, the sources of innovation. And I'm sure you don't want me to elaborate because it'd take too long, but I mean, there is a consistency. And as I say, I've written about them. You can go on Amazon and you can get my worldview if you're that interested.
And if you write a really good review, you'll get the signed book. And Phil, now you get the M part. So is there a certain product or service or anyone you'd like to give a shout out to? You can't talk about an Excel product.
Actually, I suppose with lockdown, it's made you kind of reevaluate how you do things, isn't it? And I was always big into sport, but I was, tennis, golf and what have you, more latterly. But how I kept fit, I always hated just kind of running. So I've looked at Peloton recently. And someone very bright told me once that it's all about the phygital market now, which is kind of the physical and the digital world. And I quite like that. And that's what Peloton gives you, really. It's giving you that fitness at home while using really cool tech. So while moving through lockdowns or as such, I think it's kept me relatively sane, although I do like to get out on the road and have a little cycle while there's no real sport going on.
Yeah, my partner's got a Peloton and I do enjoy it, but it takes me a while to get past the over enthusiasm of the trainers who were
I'm not clapping to do this.
And Joff, what about any regrets in your career?
Well, just thinking of your person, maybe you need a kind of cynical British program of a a trainer who's more skeptical. Any regrets? Well, many regrets. I mean, I think I'm sort of getting towards the latter stages of my career, and I think one of the things that you learn is that if you keep pushing yourself, you fail quite a bit, and at the time it doesn't feel great. but it's kind of symptomatic of, extending your limits with each new thing. And I've been involved in a couple of startups. The first one wasn't very successful. It was back at the time of the dot-com bubble and News International. We created what is basically the Times and Sunday Times online recruitment website. And at that time, as I say, the bubble burst, and our hopes for being billionaires kind of evaporated with it. But I learned some lessons from that. And then many years later, found myself in British land creating another startup inside a big company, which is Story. And I sort of took some of those lessons that I'd learned, all those years ago, and tried to make those useful. So I think lots of regrets, but the important thing is to learn from them and try and use them in some practical way.
Yeah, I completely echo that. And I guess the final part, I would actually like to hear from both of you this, but Phil, please go first. What are you most excited about in the future of Proptech?
I think it's just how the technology is moving. There's so much cool stuff coming out now from, I spoke about it earlier, the IoT world and the smart sensors and what they can do and how they can help monetize and revenue generate for customers and landlords or owners and entrepreneurs. Also the AI piece that's coming in over the top of that, and how it can help with the green agenda, CO2s, and where we put heating or what type of heating we use, the workflows around cleaning or anything like that. But really how the tech is going to enable efficiencies and customer service and growth moving forward. I think it's a really cool place to be at the moment, and lots will converge, but the technology is exciting.
And Joff, what about you? What are you most excited about?
I think real estate has been very late to really adapt and adopt. It's almost the sort of the last unchanged industry where the very concept of a landlord dates back to feudal times, and building technologies, it still takes an eternity to erect a building in the City of London and so on. But there are some technologies which are really, really questioning that. In the same way that Elon Musk has, you can now order a Tesla through an online configurator. You can buy a £60,000 car on the internet. Well, that's a new thing. There is a company called Urban Splash where you can now configure a house. So and it's a modular, flexible construction, and you can do that same sort of configuration. And there are lots of other technologies. You can transact, you can do all the conveyancing activities now through various different types of websites. In terms of physical construction, Dubai have said that the majority of their buildings are from now onwards going to be 3D printed, which is pretty amazing. The Chinese throw up, tower blocks in a couple of weeks anyway. But so I think you put all these things together, and it sort of tells you that you've got this industry that hasn't moved much for a long time. And finally, from multiple different directions, you've got technology, in some ways challenging, but in many ways sort of amenitizing and facilitating and enriching. But it's an exciting moment.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see what comes in the next 5, 10, 20 years. But both, I'm sure we're all quite thankful that we're in this space and on hopefully an exciting journey. But sadly, we're coming to the end of the podcast, and thank you both for joining me. It was great to hear about Excel and also the future of the workplace, whether it's going to be in the home or in the office. But before we go, what is the best way for our audience to connect with you both? Phil, would you like to go first?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn and through Excel's pages. My name is Phil Oliver with 2 L's on it, just so that you see it. By all means, drop me a message and we'll get through and get collaborating together.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Joff?
same thing. LinkedIn, I would say, is the easiest way to get hold of me.
Awesome. Look, thank you both for joining me on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you after the show.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our special guests. Make sure you visit our website, www.lmre.co.uk, where you can subscribe to our show, or you'll find us on iTunes and Spotify, where all good content is found. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or if you simply just spread the word. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday, and I'll catch you later.
Hi, this is Nelson from Property Quants. I'd like to invite you to join our Introduction to Data Science and Machine Learning for Real Estate seminar. To learn more, visit propertyquants.com/seminar and use special code LMRE20 on Eventbrite for a discount.
You're listening to a Podcast Company podcast. This was made by Podcast Syndicator, where we help you go from start to grow to making money with your podcast. Let us help you share your message and your voice with the world. Reach out now, Jason at podcastsyndicator.com or Brett at podcastsyndicator.com to find out more. Thank you for listening, and do come back to hear nothing but the best podcasts.